Thanks a lot. Good evening, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the session on organizational development with some psychological viewpoint. How can we benefit from the knowledge of psychology in the field of organizational development is something that we did a bit of research on, and we would like to get started on that. But before we get started, we would like to listen to you as to how you're doing. So let's do a quick check-in. Probably first 3-4 minutes we can dedicate for a quick check-in. So how is everybody doing? I know we already did a bit of check-in. I'm happy some of us have already started talking and sharing, but the others as well, if we could just pitch in and say, hi, Anil, Ritu, Alok, how is everybody doing? Quick check-in.
Perfect.
Very well then.
Waiting for the week to end.
Yes, that's the mindset, right? Let's jump into the weekend. I can feel that. I was in that for a long time. Finally, I reached home.
Sakshi needs to grab a snack.
Okay.
Relaxed.
Okay, somebody is not muted. If we could just go on mute. Yeah, thank you. So, anybody else would like to do a check-in, or shall we get started?
Looking forward to the hypnosis.
Sure, very well then. So let me just share my screen and get started. Um, okay, I hope you can see my screen now. Yeah,
Yep.
you can see my screen now. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go. The man of psychology. Okay, if you could just go on mute, please. Someone is not on mute. Someone's not on mute. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. So there you go. The man himself, Sigmund Freud, welcoming you for a session on psychology and its impact in organizational development. So the big man is welcoming you right there. And let's get quickly started. Why do we need really psychology for organizational development? What's the link here? I think some of us are HRs, some of us are L&D experts, training leaders, and we already would have dealt with a ton of people in our career so far. And anybody who has done this know that people are of different sorts. They have different viewpoints and perceptions, and the picture just portrays all of that, right? You get a picture of how many people are around, and to have a bit of hold on this people aspect is going to play an enormous role in our careers, especially we, the L&D experts or the HR managers. We need this subject to help us, guide us with people. And in one of the books that I read, I actually had the screenshot. I don't remember which book this was most unfortunately, but I'll figure it out, narrow it down, and give it to you. That I read one of the most interesting quotations. It says, "Economics is now about emotional psychology," and I could relate to that because most of the shopping malls that are built based on psychology. Most of the gamified products out there in the market, including Amazon, Amazon Pay and Google Pay, they're all using gamified methods, using psychology in the background. And you have pretty much every process is taking advantage of this. And so even for organizational development, some of these aspects are going to come in very, very handy. And naturally, at some point in time, we will have this feeling, oh, I have done a lot of HR, I've done a lot of L&D. Again, now I'm doing organizational development. How much is this psychology going to really help me? How much of this is really practical, real? Is it just a pseudoscience? Is it just some of those seemingly real things, but it's not? These are some of the thoughts that might run in your mind But here I am telling you that no, there is some real value in this. And if you can tap into this amazing spring of knowledge, you can profit from it enormously, especially I don't want to go into the next slide. I want to quickly ask all of you if you could give me a few things, a few answers as to why we need psychology while dealing with people. What are typically in organizational development? I want to hear it from you very quickly. If you could tell me 2 or 3 words that come to your mind, why do we need psychology as per your knowledge? Just give me whatever you know off the top of your mind.
Every
Anybody?
human being is different and has different, requirements. So that's where we need to understand their psychology behind it.
Right. And anything else, please? Quickly now. You
Actually,
need to think.
it can help you to understand how you react to a situation. So before even understanding others, understanding self.
Understanding behaviors.
Absolutely.
I agree
Absolutely.
with what you said. Influence. We agree on that it's a way of understanding behaviors, and
people are not easy, aren't they? Are they? People come loaded with a lot of stuff. For example, people come with a lot of baggage in their minds. They come with memories, stigmas, biases, and prejudices. And more so than ever, people now, this is an age of depression, right? Every other teenager is now depressed, and we don't know the reasons why. And there are people who affirm that it's clinical depression, not just something that they're feeling, but it's actually real. And so there's depression, trauma, and actually quite a lot of very valuable professionals get into these bogs of psychological situations. People who are high performers, you would like to have on your star team, still are under this bog, under this heavy weather, right? Now, even colors have some psychology carrying in there. The kind of colors they use for employer branding has an impact. Recently, there is a book called Mindset, written by Carol Dweck, which talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So some psychology aspects there. So people come with a lot. And if you have to handle conflict resolution in your organizations, if you have to drive anything with people, you're going to need this extremely powerful tool called psychology. Even if it gives you a 10% edge over the other experts, you would want to go for it. Even if it gives you 10% edge on a 200 people that you're handling, I think it will put you in good stead, right? So it's all about how you understand people and how you help them. Some of the high performers, some of the extremely good professionals need that extra bit of it. Especially high performing athletes, they need it. As high performing professionals in any field need that help of psychology. So very quickly, I'm going to give you some more fun examples. Now, psychology is not a serious subject. It's per se a very fun subject to learn. And you can't directly jump into Oedipus complex and ego and superego. You need a ramp up, right? You need a smooth understanding of things. You need a pleasant journey to psychology. And here it is. This is one of my absolute favorite books. This is something that you can give as a gift to any newly married couple, and they would be thoroughly enjoying this book. So why men don't listen and women can't read maps. I've read this long back when I was having some troubles with my girlfriend, and I had enormous fun with it. And it's so true. So to just give you some couple of interesting insights, just wanted to check with you. Have you ever seen any movie, or have you ever seen in your own personal life that a guy is trying to explain himself back to a girl, and he just goes and touches her to explain something, and she just says, "Don't touch me"? Have you heard that? Or has it happened to you before? Or have you seen any movie where that happens, where the girl says, "Don't touch me"? How many of you? Can you give me a quick show of hands on that? How many of you had that experience where the girl said, "Don't touch me," or you yourself said, "Don't touch me" to your boyfriend or your husband? Or you would have seen a movie? Anybody? Can you give me a hand raise on that? No? Nobody saw that? Yeah, Amit, thank you.
Sure.
Much, thank you. Yeah. So why do women say that? And have you ever seen a man saying that to a woman in return, saying, "Don't touch me"? You don't hear much of that from men. Did you ever notice why? Because the physiology is affecting the psychology there. Because ladies, the skin of ladies is said to be twice as lighter, and so they're more sensitive to the touch, and so that physiology is affecting their psychology. And some of these interesting facts, again, has it ever happened to you in your family, or maybe you would have observed it in others, that men, they are searching for something, maybe a shirt or a pen or a book, and they would be searching for something, and although it is right in front of their eyes, just right in that fridge, they couldn't find it, and they call their mother or their sister, and their mother or sister would come along, open the fridge, show it to them, and it's right in front of them. Has this happened to any one of you?
Prasanna, in my case, it happens, but positive. Oh, sorry, opposite. So I am called to
Interesting.
search.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, anyone who saw that phenomenon where men are searching for something, they just couldn't find it? Thank you, Tanya. Anybody else? Shweta, thank you. Women come and they see it right that second, and men are like clueless, except Amit, the great Amit, of course. But what I'm trying to say is, Alexis, thank you. So this phenomena is also connected to psychology, and it's because men over the evolution, men have developed sight for distant objects so that they can hunt things right. And women are given that gift of observing intuitions, instincts, understanding emotions because of the child care. Right? Sanika, if you could just go on mute, please. I'm muting you there. Sorry. Yeah. So let me quickly go back. Now, a couple of things that I wanted to highlight, that by learning some of these fun aspects about men and women and children, you can read these books and you can develop on that. And that's one of the fundamental steps of psychology. Although it doesn't teach you the entire psychology, it definitely goes to explain some of the evidences. And it's fun. It's fun to read that, right? So you don't need to jump into psychology all the way and drown in it. And it's too deep, actually, too big as well. I will explain why. So of late, there are a ton of organizations and companies that are taking full advantage of UI UX. Any online website or app has to deal with UI UX, user interface, user experience, and all that. How do they do that? They use the shapes and the colors, and both colors and shapes are being taken into consideration, and that is again given by psychology. So these are some of the simpler ways of ramping up your learning and knowledge on psychology. You don't have to directly jump into Oedipus complex. Okay, so now let me quickly give you some flashback and remind you what happened in our session. So once I give you that flashback in background, so you need to recall all that. Okay, to help you, I'm going to play some dreamy music. Just try to catch this. Okay. Again, I'm going to play this again. So you just have to recall all the class memories, what was taught in our session by Professor Ravindra. I'm going to quickly run these slides, not going to take much of your time. So some women said to have this condition called hysteria, and men are said to have this condition called OCD. And there's no cure for hysteria, only hypnotism and conversations. This theory of ID, ego, superego is from Sigmund Freud's theory, 1923, personality theory. You could go ahead and read upon this a little bit, but maybe some of those memories are still there somewhere in your mind. So I'm just giving you this slide. So there are fixation stages, 0 to 1 year, 1 to 2 year, 2 to 3 years, so on and so forth. There is this big theory on Oedipus complex. We already know that. I'm just trying to recap. Unconscious mind, then libido. Libido is the source of energy. Unconscious, ID, ego, superego, the iceberg model. We already know that. One of the most important things that I wanted to then discuss without taking much of your time is, why do we need psychology again? For organizational development's sake, is because people are not simple. People say something and do something else and actually think and feel something else. So we need, sorry, muting, right. People, when you're dealing with people of this sort, you need to have a hold on what's going on, what's really going on. And this is a question that you keep asking people, right? What's really going on here in this conflict or in this scenario? And that is simply defense mechanisms. In order to hide what is actually going on, people use a ton of these defense mechanisms. You need to be able to find the truth in this, okay, to get to the bottom of it. And these are the defense mechanisms mentioned in the session by Ravindran sir. So I'm happy that I'm giving you a basic revision of that. And this is my absolute favorite part. Okay, you've learned all this and you have picked up some insights. But what are some of the insights? Let me test your knowledge of how you can use these insights to really do something actionable. I'll show you a couple of Rajnikant dialogues, which Professor Ravindranath mentioned. I mean, it's almost like, Rajnikant's one-liner punch dialogues, right? Some revelatory facts. But okay, now that you know those facts, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to show you a couple of them. You're going to tell me from your mind how you're going to use those insights for actions ahead. These are the two very powerful insights. All sports is aggression sublimated. All arts is sexual urge sublimated. How are you going to use this? So if sports is aggression sublimated, how are we going to use it in organizational development? Any quick answers, please?
So maybe use sports as a team building exercise.
Thank you. That's exactly why we take people. You see these fancy companies taking their employees for river rafting, white river rafting, and Goa, excursions. That's because what you're doing unknowingly or knowingly is you're actually sublimating their aggression, and you're removing that unnecessary energy, because people have too much energy sometimes. You need to dissipate that. You need to show a way for them to dissipate that. And these are good people. The problem with some of the great organizations is they have great employees, but they have developed these psychological conditions. If only you can dissipate that extra unnecessary energy, you can make excellent use of the professional. Now, Prasanna Sai might have some small psychological disorders, but he might be a good trainer. And if only you can help me with it, I can, help you, help your organization in return. So very quickly, I think we saw, so how do you use that? And all arts, that's why some of the times giving arts exposure is also useful, holding this context is useful. Another interesting thing is handwriting analysis. It's an excellent science. By the way, this is not something that you can trivialize easily. This is something that is accepted in the court of law as well, because courts as well, because that's how our signatures are being analyzed. Okay, there is a ton of psychology in this, excellent stuff. So with all these small tools, it's my belief that you will ramp up your learning on psychology. And with that, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks a lot for listening. Now, now that we have understood that there are so many actionable insights with psychology and we can learn and develop a lot, now I'm handing it over to my friend Radhika, who's going to take you through and give us a deep dive with Kurt Lewin. And we're going to learn more so that we can actually use those insights. So thanks a lot once again for listening to my presentation. Radhika, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasanna. And a bit of an introduction about you. You haven't introduced yourself.
Do I have to introduce myself?
I thought it'll be nice. People would want to know you.
Yeah, actually, I would like to show one thing. I really love books and I collect books. But when I went to buy some of these books, I bought an Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, which is like this big, right? And I bought an Oxford Dictionary of Psychology terms, and look how fat this is. Clearly, even in our life, the knowledge of psychology is the underside, the bottom side of the iceberg. And philosophy, although we think is great, is only this big. So you can understand that psychology is super big. I love books. I love to teach and learn. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. I've learned a lot from each one of you. Radhika, that's pretty much my introduction. I'm happy. Radhika, thanks a lot. Please carry on. Do you want me to go?
Yes, you can start my slides.
Perfect. There you go.
Okay. So I'm going to be touching upon OD. So our topic for the team is organizational development and psychology. And they're very vast topics. So we thought we'll pick up few areas that will really help all of us recap some important facts. The first thing that I'm going to pick up on is the timelines of key OD thinkers. So these are the people whose names have been famous in psychology. There's someone who's not on mute. Yeah.
Let
So
me check on that. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, nobody. We're all good. Please go ahead.
Give me, thank you. So here we are. Yeah. So these are these famous psychologists who've done great job in what they've been famous for. And amongst them, I've picked up Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin is a social psychologist, and he was always born. It was while we were researching together, I really thought it was fascinating to know a little bit of background instead of going directly into his theory. So this man was born in Germany at the time, and there was this Nazis and the war happening. He lived only for 56 years. And in this 56 years, in the last 15 years, he did a lot of work. He was a German born, but based out of, so he immigrated to America. And in the beginning, he was very fascinated with Greek philosophy. I remember, I think, Professor Ravindran, or I think him telling about his Greek philosophy love. And he had first joined medicine. I was amazed to read. He was a medicine student, and he couldn't handle the subject of anatomy, so he had to drop out. And from there, he thought, why don't he try his luck with experimental psychology? So what he did is he approached one of the psychologists and got himself a role of supervisor, where he learned how to work with experiment groups. That's where he realized his love and passion for seeing people and observing people to know their individual relationships and their group relationships. Now, from there began his journey. When the war started, he had to immigrate. So he graduated within that time in psychology. He did his PhD in Berlin. And then he got an offer to work in America as a part-time professor in Yale University. During this time, what he used to do is in the evenings, because he was a part-time professor, he used to gather students, and he used to think how arithmetic, physics, philosophy, and psychology, all of these put together, how he could make a change in the real life workings of the people in Germany, how Germany could become a democratic country. So he did a lot of these small sessions, very informal sessions with groups, and which was very inspiring for many of the students who used to meet him outside. From here, it started that he became a very loved professor, a typical absent-minded professor who has so many ideas to share. And then he also he was then called into this Harvard University to give his talks, his ideas, and he started his social psychology journey from there on. So he became famous much later in life. All those experiments really began earlier. He really worked upon top 4 theories that we can recall and that we know of. Today, we are students of TIS, so we are learning about him. 2 of these theories we've already gone through the teach bag, through the professors. 2 of the theories, I think we need a completion for Kurt Lewin. So I thought we'll pick up those 2 theories which are left out. We'll go further. Prasanna, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is exactly what he believes in. If you want to truly understand something, try to change it. That's a typical Kurt Lewin saying. Okay. Okay, go ahead. You can take my pictures later, Prasanna. Just pulling a leg. Yes. Kurt Lewin, 1930 to 1946. These were his researches. First two, we've really had a fantastic quiz on force field theory. And we've heard a lot from Professor on unfreeze change and refreeze theory. I'll go and deep dive into the leadership styles, and my colleague will deep dive into the group dynamics. Okay. So let's go to the next one. So this is something to recap on. We're not saying much. We did about driving forces, restraining forces, measure, and then we applied which of the positive changes or the negative changes, which of them is on the heavier side, and we take decisions accordingly. Okay, next, Prasanna. The unfreeze, change, refreeze. This was a pioneering research, a lot of work done on change sensitivity from here onwards till date. And this was a point where what happens to a group or individuals when the change happens. And during this change, what is the kind of emotions that people go through? What are the restraining factors around? What are the factors that you need to keep around? And then how do you freeze? Okay, refreeze. Okay, so this is something that we've done, more like a recap. I'm going to go and deep dive. This is something I'm sure we've heard these words. Some of us can even recall these leadership styles we've studied in our management or somewhere, at least in MBA, BBA. But these words are always there. But did you know that Kurt Lewin was the one who really gave these words and who did the research to launch and talk about the autocratic, the laissez-faire, and the democratic style of leadership? So, you know what he did? He was doing an experiment, and he was doing an experiment with school children, which were 10 years old. And he brought these school children together and he gave them craft works to do. So he gave them something to do, making masks, making wheels, sticking paper. And they were each of these rooms were given a leader, the leader who was having a typical style of leadership. So we are not here. So he did not really see what trait the person brings. He's studying the style of leadership that the person brought about and what kind of effect these styles will have on the people or on the followers. He calls these words the leader and the followers rather than the employee or the person, because he's studying the children, remember, which was also critiqued later. So here in the autocratic style, let's any of you, I'm sure we all remember autocratic style, laissez-faire. Any of you would remember anything on autocratic style before we deep dive into the next slide? Any of you can recall? What happens? What kind of leader is a leader with autocratic style of leadership? What disposition does he show? What behavior does he show? What is the effect? Anything on chat? No. Okay.
The autocratic ones are the ones who make all the decisions. Sorry, I was saying, yeah, decision making is for the leader, basically, not autocratic.
There are followers. There is a leader, there are followers. And
yes, for him, it's the leader and the followers. They follow me, my way or the highway. Thank you for that. And also that it's more like an autocratic where one person rules. It's a boss-centric kind of atmosphere. It's my decision. You don't ask questions. Fantastic. I'm reading and helping me. This is helping me so much. I don't need to see my notes or the slides. This is so lovely.
Hi Radhika, this is Amit here. Just adding in one comment. Sometimes I think all of us can show autocratic style. It also depends on the situation.
Yes.
So say if the time is very less and if you need quick results, sometimes even a collaborative leader can move into this space.
Absolutely. So can you recall a situation or a domain where the autocratic leadership will work very well? Any of you can think through.
Armed forces. Armed forces.
Yes, that's right. Military forces. Somewhere you need to take quick decisions. You can't wait. And would you know why this is that we need quick decisions? But what kind of skill level do you think the people, the followers have? What kind of crisis situation? Thanks, Tanya. Crisis situation. emergency situations in the country. You need to have a quick decision, military rules. But what kind of followers do you think the military rule has? Highly skilled, medium skilled, low skilled, that this can be applied, autocratic can be applied.
Low to medium skill.
Yeah.
So it's a very low to medium, but very low skilled followers, because they are not using their mind. They're just following orders. So what would they require? What kind of supervision do you think they require? Directive supervision. Continuously, they need to be supervised. You cannot leave them alone. And they need to have someone they have to have someone to give them orders. They feel absolutely headless if they have no direction. Yes, Air Force, yes. I can't say low skill there for sure.
Perhaps less complex or less complicated tasks. And say that it's easier to
Maybe
supervise
and clearly the tasks are as per the roles that are defined very clearly. Then you can follow this kind of leadership where they don't make their decisions and follow paths or actions which are not as per the SOP. Okay.
Radhika, this is Anurag. I just want to add over here, although I totally agree with armed force example, it is quite apt whenever we talk about autocratic. But I saw during this COVID period also, if you see in various, big hospitals wherein the, mob of the patients were very high, there you can see that the hospital administrator or maybe the senior doctor was fully into autocratic mode based on his experience and the instructions what he or she was getting from the top. And all the learned people. So we can't say they are low skilled, but for the given situation, I think that autocraticness suddenly came up. So maybe the leader was democratic or maybe laissez-faire, but he became autocratic for certain situations. So I just thought to share this example.
Yes.
Radhika,
no, you're right. Yes.
Sorry, you may continue. Yes. One of my experiences also say autocratic leaders are very well aware of their team members, and only because of that they are able to control them, and they don't really go into dissent. So while we are talking about, I really don't completely agree with low skilled or I believe I think autocratic leaders have spent enough time to understand people so that their command actually becomes their norm. Else it will be a dissent situation. So that's the positive angle, probably.
Got it. I'll pass this to Kurt Lewin.
Alok here, just to add on. So I just wanted to ask one question. Autocratic leadership style, is it like the leaders need to be autocratic owing to his personality, or the context matters here?
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Context really matters. Context really matters. Situation matters. The entire research that was done, why was it done? The research actually was done to study the aggressive behavior of children in that room. And do you know that while they were doing this experiment, what came out is the 3 styles of leadership. They were wanting to study the behavior of different styles of leadership, but what became more famous was a defined style of leadership, which was later studied. And it went on to become situational leadership, transformational leadership, Goldsman's leadership style. So there's so much research done on this. This was just the pioneering work. And your question, definitely, these leadership styles are picked and chosen based on the situation they are. This is how the application of this theory is. Today we can say it. At that time, while the research was being done, this was not a known fact at which domain, which industry or which kind of task would require which kind of leadership. So this is what I read. In fact, I had these questions in mind and I thought, if somebody asks me, then what? So this is what little I've gathered from reading.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yes. Prasanna, you took away my slides. They've been made with a lot of love. Please show them.
Just a little bit on
did we lose
this whole armed forces being autocratic. I'm not able to sort of get my mind. You know, so
Okay,
if you look at it,
emergency
just
situation.
let me express my point of view there. You know, army or armed forces, they do tend to operate according to defined SOPs. And if you see, there is a certain degree of division of power. You know, you have ranks. At each rank, there is a certain power, authority vested in you. And maybe I would agree in a warlike situation, perhaps, you know, one could see.
Sorry. I'm going to share my screen. I'm sorry.
So, so I just wanted to distinguish that from, let's say, a situation where an army commander takes over a country and starts administering over civil, you know, administration, right? Which is not what the purpose of armed forces typically is, right? Maybe in that situation, it's easier for us to understand armed forces as an autocratic entity, perhaps also in a warlike situation. But otherwise, the way they are organized, they operate with a certain SOP, which is not necessarily vested by the top leadership of the armed forces. It's there, it's systemic. Whereas in an autocratic situation, I would say the power will be strongly vested in the top authority, and the discretion of who holds what power in the hierarchy below will be vested with that leader at the top, right? So which will typically be visible in a, you know, army leadership taking over civil administration. So they'll determine who does what, who has power, their own coterie will have the power. And so there's no standard SOP necessarily applicable over there. So I just thought I'll just bring a little bit of that nuance.
No, I think I'm glad you get that angle to it, because there's so many papers I've been reading just to get some more insight into these three styles, and each one of them mentioned military. I personally think they're mentioning military because of the quick action, immediate urgency, keeping in control. I think the low skill when they're putting out there is for ability not to dishonor anyone there, but definitely only to bring out where people need to follow orders. So this is at the time of Kurt Lewin's research. This is not in today's times. So there's so much change that has happened. This is only as per his, I would say, the little work that was done around it, which was not even the method that she was wanting to do. He was trying to see aggressive behavior of children. Point noted, and very well noted. I get your insight. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Ours is not to question why. Ours is but to do or die. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, Linus.
Just also want to add, Radhika, the fact that a lot of this, the timing of this work was, you know, during the period of World War I and following through to World War II. And on the backdrop of people who were, you know, who were getting commissioned and returning and making sure the right kind of folks were getting into the ranks of people who were fighting, you know, for these wars. So I think the context of the research was pretty much at that point focused on what is working well, and not just during the war, but also, I mean, if you see, I can't say for a lot of militaries, but if you just see sort of Indian military or, you know, other arms within military, there is a lot of command and control in everyday situations. Yeah, as you said, Anil, some of it is systemic, but a lot of it is also leadership driven. And typically folks who make it higher up the ranks are folks who have a really good command over their, you know, over their companies, their battalions, the men. not just sort of technically from a technical standpoint, but also from understanding how to engage with them and their families. So things are indeed changing, but I think the setting back in time was really focused on sort of a military backdrop. Radhika, back to you.
Yes, so let me also add to this. The most productive style after the research was over was the autocratic leadership style, because the children at that time, I think the children at that time were told to finish certain products while they were doing these creative crafts. So that they found was the best, the most highly productive was the autocratic leadership, followed by democratic, and then was the laissez-faire. I'm going to explain each one of them. I've not even done that, but I wanted to bring this element out. So there was one element of being favorable or not was also being studied, which is being favorable. The autocratic was the least favorable. The most favorable was the democratic style. So let's go into each one and let's find out more. So next slide, please. Next one. Yeah, so here we are. This is a slide which says advantages of autocratic leadership. So this is a place, I mean, this is a kind of style which says we have a centralized approach. It's like a top-down approach. Coming from the top, you don't question, you definitely get the action done. It's very, very demanding, very stressful for the people who are both in this position. The turnover of people, the followers. So the turnover of the follower is very high because of the stress they leave. They feel they're not heard enough. Wherever quick decisions, emergency situations are required, you definitely apply this style of leadership. It's all these three styles of leadership are situational, and these could be chosen based on the situation. What happens here in the negative, definitely there's a dependency culture that develops. The people below will not think much, will wait for the orders to come. There's a kind of fear and resentment because which they leave. And communication is generally one way. The top-down approach is just one way. So that's how it is. Later on, this particular style of leadership, where the research was done, moved into situational leadership. Blanchard did a lot of study further on this. I think the directing, coaching, all that comes much later. But this is where it started, where the neve was laid, I would say. Okay, the next one, please. Now, many of us would have seen in our lives a democratic leadership style. We could recall managers we've had to see what kind of leader, what kind of style they follow. Many times we label them as autocratic leaders, but it's the style they are following. So advantages of democratic. So what is democratic? Democratic says, I have the power. I will not give the power to the people alone. I keep it with me. And I will ask their views. So for example, if I have to tell someone to go and buy a washing machine, and if I tell a group of followers to buy a washing machine, I will give them few guidelines and I'll tell them this is what the guideline must be. And now you have the choice to buy whichever washing machine you wish to, keeping these few guidelines in mind. So you keep the power and authority, yet you take their participation. This is also called participative leadership style. And it creates a very good environment, very friendly environment at work. There's not much turnover of people. Decision making, as we said, was good because people feel a part of the decision. You feel heard. It really thrives. A lot of creative culture thrives here. People are given to work on their own, and yet there's a slight control which is kept. They are questioned, they are led, but they are allowed to be themselves. Now here, if the wisdom of the leader is not enough, he can easily hide it because he's going to ask the participants for more answers. If he wants to know a little more details, he will ask more details he will ask more answers from the participants. So his wisdom or his ability as a leadership can be easily hidden. He can mislead the people. The disadvantages of the leadership style is the decision can take a long time, because here people would love to experiment, do their own bit, come back. So this can be a little long. This can take a little longer. I would say in 2019, I did not have much material here, but they say that there was a very deep study done by the headmasters. And there was a journal of educator in the journal of education that came that when the headmasters were teaching the teachers, when they used this style, it was called as a best style of leadership, which also gave them an impetus to work on this further. So this was one of the experiments taken. Again, it was very recent. This is only 2019 I'm talking about. Then let me go to the next one. Let me go to the next one, which is the laissez-faire one. Okay. The laissez-faire is a French word. It means allow it to be, let them do it. This was coined at the time in France when they wanted to really run the economy and handle on their own. They said, allow it to be. This is the reference word that came in, and laissez-faire leadership is taken from there. Here, what happens in this leadership style, the manager, although he's a great manager, he will give the freedom, the power, and the authority to the people below him. So ideally, this would be ideal in a case where there's a project manager leading very creative people. They can work on their own. They need little guidance, but they can really be masters in what they're doing because they know their job well, they know their skill well. So this is ideally done for, yes, I'll tell you about this. Definitely, I'll add that. So this is generally done on, this kind of leadership is very, 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 very powerful, used in the domain where the leaders are leading large number of skilled, independent people, creative people. Here what happens, they realize that there's a very high pressure. Can you believe, from all the styles, the people at the follower level, they found the stress was the highest because they did not know whether they're in the right direction, because the leaders had given them the power, the authority lied with them. So they were very scared whether they're in the right, in the direction. So they were very stressed on the outcome. The good part is there's a lot of freedom. They can do what they want. This time was a factor which took really, really long. What else? I think there's a lot of ambiguity. And encouragement was not there. They had to be self-motivated. Only then this style will work. So this is all about the laissez-faire style. So yes, now let me come back to a question which was posted saying about the DISC. Okay, we have the DISC. We have so many leadership styles. We have the Strength Finder. There's another style. So the DISC is about 4 styles of leadership, which talks about dominance, influential, consensus, or compliant. And the S is a steady. So these are 4 styles of leadership, very, very new. Wiley is the organization that certifies people. Thomas assessment is another psychometric assessment that gives you a lot of work, a lot of tools to work and find out which leadership style you are. So in fact, we just did the DISC assessment a few years back. And I know if I am an influential leader, I know my traits. And when I go into the room and the chart there has been written down as a D and an I, influence between the D and the I know that I'm approaching someone. These are the traits that I must be, I must be having knowledge of. Okay. Lakshmi, would you want to add that on the report? I don't know about that particular Savile report, if you can add that. I know about the DISC. You wanted to just add that from the Leadership Impact Report?
Yes, it's based on the Savile framework, and Savile framework is a more modern version of the OPQ for people who are familiar with the OPQ that's used. And Saville talks about 4 different kinds of leaders that an organization can have. People leader, pioneering leader, all of that. So it takes into consideration. It's based on the Saville model.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I didn't know about this particular leadership impact. No wonder it's called a teach back. Thank you. And Poonam, yes, DISC is a personality behavioral model. I think I added that as a leadership style. It's a personality behavioral model. Very exciting. The tool, especially the psychometric tool, is very exciting when you finish that and you find out where you are. And it's so accurate. I mean, for us, it was very accurate. Yeah, I've done a lot of work around it, so I could add. Yes, yes, you say it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of work too. Okay, let's do some. You guys have been very involved. Let me see how involved all of you have been. I'm going to do a little scenario test and little quiz, and you're going to tell me which style of leadership do you think these scenarios will fit in. Okay, so this is also an eye test for you because the font size that I have used is terrible, and we'll do a little bit eye test along with it. So here we go. Communication is required to be fast. Which style of leadership do you think we should adapt here? You can unmute and have some fun. Okay, A. So this is on the autocratic. Yes, autocratic. Okay. Higher stress levels. Guys, you can unmute. Even if we go wrong, it's okay. Higher stress level. I just gave the clue. Yes. The last one, which is the laissez-faire type. Yes, absolutely. Leaders guide and direct decisions. Leaders guide and direct decision. I'm also trying to get the answers. Leaders guide and direct decisions. Democratic. Very little flexibility. Yes, autocratic. Yes. There are 3 people participating. Let others come in. Fastest finger first is what we are playing. There is no Crorepati rewards and awards here. Incorporates feedback. Oh, sorry, I missed one. When team is already motivated to work. When is this place when the team is already motivated to work? Yes, the third one, which is the laissez-faire one. The team is already motivated to work. You don't have to do much. Just control them, give them direction, and they're going to be on their own. Incorporates feedback. Who is the leader? Which leadership style incorporates? Very happy to incorporate any feedback, even critical feedback. No, the autocratic guy cannot take any feedback. He does not have time. So democratic is the person. Democratic leadership style incorporates feedback. Fantastic. I will not talk about military management anymore. Okay, I've had enough, so I will not do that. And I think autocratic is what the examples showed. Low skilled is not. I would not want to relate to this, and I'll stop that conversation there. Over dependence on team. Come on, guys. Over dependence on team. Laissez-faire, over dependence on team. We have ideal style where when there is a group of skilled employees. This is an ideal style when the employees or the followers are very skilled. So yes, laissez-faire one. I'm just being smart by asking the same question again, like a psychometric tool, so that you guys are listening or not. Use this style for developing ownership in team. Ownership in team. Which style would develop ownership in team? Yes. So ownership is actually the highest ownership is seen in the laissez-faire types. Okay. It's followed by the democratic style. Yes. Adolf Hitler is an example of which? Okay. Autocratic. Okay. Warren Buffett is an example of 4th richest man in the world. Do you know he actually practiced laissez-faire? He only has 4 meetings in a month with his leaders, and he allows them to be themselves. So that's laissez-faire. Warren Buffett is a laissez-faire. Don't debate, because I did a lot of research here, and I'm sure about this man, Warren Buffett. Okay. Then comes high emphasis on tasks. High emphasis on tasks. Yes, absolutely. So if you have this quadrant of people and task, you will actually see the people, on the side of the people would be laissez-faire, democratic. Highest on task will be autocratic. Yes, high emphasis on task, high emphasis on people will be democratic. Oh God, this is terrible. Pallavi, I didn't mean to be autocratic. Thank you.
Just joking, just joking.
Guys, debate. Okay. Then comes use this style when skill level is low of the employees. Remove this. I'm not debating here. We will not do this element. We'll go to the 16th one. High pressure, time is short. This leadership style will not work. High pressure, time is short. This leadership style will not work.
Laissez-faire.
Yes, this will not work. Definitely laissez-faire will not work. See, I've twisted the question. It took me at least 3 hours to make these questions, interlinked and twist the questions. Okay, comes around the next one. Surround yourself with the best people to get the job done and delegate authority. Which style do you think will say this? Delegate authority. Remember, you're delegating the authority and power here. So you're not keeping the authority with yourself. So which leadership style says this? Laissez-faire. I think I've done a lot on laissez-faire questions, really bad balance. Directive communication is character of this leadership style. Directive communication. Absolutely. Autocratic. Thank you. So guys, this is an end on my side of research on leadership styles. Any other questions? Any other questions before I hand it over to my colleague Ashisha? Okay, Pavni, thank you for that claps. I so needed it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Radhika. So while we had a very engaging session with Radhika and I saw a lot of participation, just want to do a midway check. So how's the Josh?
It's high.
Great. Hi. All right.
Yes.
Super. Good. So I will be speaking about T groups. Okay. When Prasanna opened the session, he spoke about psychology and how psychology is, can be used in OD. All of us are HR professionals. We are either in, L&D, and very beautifully, all of you spoke that it helps in, understanding our own self, knowing our biases, and also learning about others. So T group was one such method which Kurt Lewin came up with. Has anybody heard about T group?
Yes, Anurag, I heard.
All right, Anurag. So Anurag, would you like to share with us what do you know about T group?
It's a group wherein people come together for discussing a couple of pointers over here, and they reach to a conclusion.
Okay. All right. Would anyone else like to add to what Anurag just spoke? Any other thoughts?
It's emerging, so there's no agenda for it, and as it comes, emerging ideas.
Correct. So it's a group which is brought together with no agenda in mind, no structure. Many times there's no expected outcome also, that's how it started. But there are certain variations also of T group, and I'll speak about that shortly. Where, Anurag said that there's something which the group has to talk about. So that's a variation of the T group, and I'll speak about it subsequently. So T group started with having no agenda. It was basically, a group of 8 to 15 participants. They were brought together for an extended period. The idea was to interact with each other, see how their, whatever their reactions or their communication, what kind of impact did it have on others? So was the intent that somebody have similar to the impact that actually had on other people? This was facilitated by a trained facilitator. He would just bring the group together and let the group be. And one of the person in the group would start speaking, and based on that, the conversation would flow. People would share their emotions. It could be, if they're feeling anger, fear, whatever emotions, they would share that emotion. with no judgment or no conclusion whatsoever. So it was just knowing about how I react to another person, and what is the kind of reaction my communication gets from the people in the group. So how do others perceive me, and what kind of effect do I have on others? So this is the basis, the premise of a T group. Now, if this is a kind of tool that we have, when I say OD and psychology, how do you think I can use T group in OD? So if I had to, use this in a setting in my organization, what could be some of the usages? Any thoughts?
To discuss impact of change, maybe.
Okay, so we can use it for change management.
Diagnose a problem if there is one.
All right, diagnose a problem. Pavneet is saying to build trust.
Generally, any space where we want psychological safety to be put in.
All right. Culture studies. Okay, yes, it's also used for culture setting as well. Prasanna, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So some of the ways in which we can actually T group is, first is starting with self-understanding. So when you participate in a T group setting, it gives you a lot of self-awareness about your strengths as well as your areas of improvement. As I said, it is to study what kind of reaction do people have when you're communicating, or what is your reaction to people. So it can also help in building, your emotional intelligence, and it's used a lot for emotional intelligence as well. There's also an article by Daniel Coleman on the same. It was published in the year 1975. It's also used to improve interpersonal communication for self as well as in a group setting. Again, the learnings from a T group can be used for coaching and mentoring. For team building activities, so organizations use T group for team building, where the group gets together for an extended period and they learn about each other and they learn how to have an effective communication and collaboration within the team. Someone also spoke about culture, so corporate culture initiatives. And a recent development in T group is appreciative inquiry, which my team member Tanya will take you through subsequently. So these are some of the usages of T group. Now, T group became very famous in the 60s and 70s. A lot of T groups were organized. However, there were not very highly skilled facilitators available who could conduct T groups. Okay? And it's very essential that when we have a T group setting, we should have a trained facilitator, okay? Because T groups can also backfire and have some negative impact. So some of the controversial aspects of T group is a lot of self-disclosure and openness happened in the group. So there's a possibility that people personally open and speak about their, it could be some trauma, it could be some weakness, and in an organizational setting, that might not be appreciated. What other controversial aspects can you think of? So, if I say, if we have conducted a T group, what else do you think can go wrong?
Digress from the core subject.
Okay, digress from the core subject.
Individual biases can come in.
Individual biases, yeah, not accepting the feedback, right?
Can make people insecure.
It can make people insecure, right? So feedback.
What vociferous of the group get heard more often than the, let's say, the slightly less aggressive people.
Correct. So people can also bully, so they can be smaller groups within the group and they can bully against a particular individual. And that's why you need a highly skilled facilitator to ensure that, when the topic is being digressed or something, some kind of a bullying is happening, the facilitator needs to step in and ensure that, it's stopped there. Also, sometimes feedback can get very personal and not, taken well. That could cause serious and lasting psychological damage to the participants. In fact, it's said that if you've attended a tea group, you should not make any major life decisions within the next 6 months of attending a tea group. Now, some of the recent uses in the industry when it comes to tea group is by a person called Robert Crosby. Okay, and he calls it tough stuff. So you can also Google it on the internet. Tough stuff is basically when there is an agenda that you want to talk about. Now, tea group actually started with having no agenda. Okay, and it was as I said, there are certain variations that were developed over the years. One of the variation is tough stuff, where there is an agenda. So if an organization has an agenda of team building or collaboration or maybe productivity, so whatever be the agenda, there is a tea group which is formed, and there are two circles within the tea group. So there's an inside circle and an outside circle. The inside circle is your traditional tea group, okay, which is going to discuss, share emotions and interact. And the outside group is basically the observers who are going to observe and give feedback. These are core behavioral, these are people with core behavioral skills who are going to give feedback to the people in the inside circle. And they work on real work issues. So this is used in a lot of organization. Yes, something like a fishbowl, yeah, the feedback. And it's also been recently, it's something very famous in the Silicon Valley these days. So a lot of tech startups, especially leadership in tech startups, go through tea group sessions to become better leaders, to develop skills like empathy, okay, softer skills. So you see a lot of tea groups happening in the Silicon Valley. So this
actually, if I may add here, Ashisha, just when you mentioned the tea group and the fishbowl concept, not just Silicon Valley. The school that my daughter went to, the Krishnamurti Foundation School, they employ this for issues that are sensitive in class for the senior students, where they have a circle, inner circle, who discusses the topic. And there are a set of students sitting outside. It's like a mini, it's not that mature, but it's the same concept of a tea group, where there's a set of outsiders sitting in the outside circle, and the children call it the fishbowl.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lakshmi, for adding that. I knew that it's used in an educational setup also, but I didn't, have a lot of research, and then that's why I didn't add it over here. So any other thoughts anyone would like to share on tea groups? I myself am very fascinated with tea groups. I heard about tea groups from someone I knew who had attended it from ISAPS. I think ISAPS does tea groups in India. However, she did not have a very good experience, probably because it was not facilitated by a skilled facilitator. So any other thoughts you would like to share with the group?
Just had a question, Ashisha. So this is around why should the leader or the individual not take a major life decision after attending a tea group? That's not very intuitive to me. If you could explain that. Very
Sure.
curious.
Because as mentioned, one of the controversial thought about tea group is that it can have some kind of a psychological damage, because you get a lot of you get feedback, and it's also eye opener. It's like a real life situation where you are in a group with people and you're getting real time feedback there then in that moment, here and now. So if you've not taken that very positively,
okay,
yeah,
There's a lot of sharing,
answer. Thanks.
sometimes very personal details, and it depends on the topic that you're discussing. Sometimes you open up and you share confidential information. You also have to be open to what you receive during that time, because it's all held in confidence. So sometimes what comes to you can be hard to take during that time. And sometimes you get very affected by what somebody else is going through in the group. So typically it takes time to recover from that.
Yeah. Can I just share? So I've been part of the ISABS T group, and I'll just share why it didn't really work for me. And I think a couple of people who I knew after is you share a lot. That's true. There is some amount of feedback that you get, and you're right, Ashisha and team, when you say that you need a very experienced facilitator. But what happens is after you share literally your deepest, darkest, vulnerable spaces, it doesn't close for you. When you open up those spaces, you are left in a very hurtful, vulnerable space, and you go out into the world with those wounds and spaces opened up. And when that doesn't close up for you, that affects your decision making. It affects how you go out into the world, and you may not really be aware of those. And that was the one thing that I wanted to share, is because it doesn't seal up. There is no quote unquote healing that happens.
Ideally, Melissa, if the facilitator is good, what I'm assuming, there will be a closure. If the facilitator is good,
there isn't closure. There
wouldn't be a closure even if the facilitator is good. Then that's dangerous.
Possibly, but maybe it was the facilitator I had. In the sense, the idea was just to have that openness, that you come to a space of vulnerability, and that's it. It doesn't really move beyond that. At least for me, in my experience, it didn't move beyond coming to that place of vulnerability and coming to the space of why you do what you do. And why do you behave, and why do you look at the world the way you do? It just, the objective of the entire first level was come to a space of why you do what you do. And that was the whole objective.
Okay.
And so after that, there was nothing. There was nothing, unless maybe if you attended the advanced level human practice, this thing, then maybe that was then, but that was much later. But the objective was met in level 1 of coming to that space, and that was where it was left.
Thanks for that very real thing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing.
That's a first-hand experience. So
you're welcome.
I believe also Landmark uses T groups. Has anybody heard of Landmark?
I've heard of Landmark, but haven't experienced it. But it's a smaller version of T group that ISABS does. It's a very smaller version that Landmark does. And I agree with what Melissa is saying, because even I have experienced the same.
I have heard of Landmark. I had a colleague from my previous organization who went through it and came out with the perception that it's more like a cult, where you have to sell and get more people to join Landmark. That's the focus of it. I'm not sure. I did not go through it. Talking about T group and facilitator driven. So in my previous organization, we did behavioral interventions where hot seat feedback was employed. It comes down to the facilitator, who has to be extremely skilled to handle situations, as well as bring closure to that, like Melissa mentioned. So there would be a very, very rigorous process of actually closure on that once the feedback is given.
Ideally, in the ideal
yes. So no, I'm saying in those workshops that they used to conduct, they would ensure that that feedback loop is closed. And it would go through a very rigorous process on that. Of course, it comes down to the facilitator to be able to manage that and having actually experienced that themselves. Right? Bad experience. Sorry, I was just going to say, there was a bad experience where, in one company, feedback was given by, I think, the CEO to one of his direct reports. And it was so harsh that that guy had a bad, I think he had a cardiac arrest or something like that. And but in general, that guy was known to be very harsh with all his employees, and that was a loop that they were trying to close and bring him into perspective. But post that, I think feedback was given to that organization that if they wanted to proceed further, then they would have to do something about their CEO themselves. So that was a decision that they had to take, because he was not, people could not work with him.
Wow.
That's a T group gone really wrong.
I would say that's a T group gone really, very costly, but right.
Yes.
Very, very costly. Yeah, I mean, human life had to, I don't know if the person was alive or not after the cardiac arrest.
No, he recovered, but the person was also a very emotional person. So that also plays a factor, how they can actually take it. Because expectation setting has to be done really well before the program.
Very, very costly T group intervention going right.
Yeah.
Right. Pavneet had a question. So, about closure. So I think that, when they get into coaching and mentoring, that's when you can get some kind of a closure, or you can have some kind of action planning with, what you've learned during the T group.
Fair enough.
So thank you, everyone. That's what I wanted to cover about T group. As I mentioned, T group also has a variation, which is appreciative inquiry. So I'll hand over the baton to Tanya, who's going to take you through appreciative inquiry. Tanya, over to you.
Right. Okay. So thank you. We're going to pace up now because we are we're running a bit behind, and so moving on to appreciative inquiry and building on what has been said earlier, especially around use of psychology to understand people, their biases, their drivers, and sometimes their agenda. So appreciative inquiry actually is a tool, a model, a framework used by practitioners, not just in organization development, but otherwise as well, to essentially use positive psychology in driving the right set of conversations. So before I show you the slide, and if you can just hold on to that, Prasanna, for me, I'll talk to you about a particular scenario. And I would request you all to just wear your thinking hat for a moment and think about how would you approach it. At a current point where there is limited understanding of appreciative inquiry. The scenario is fairly straightforward. Think about a situation where you're running, or where there is say a call center of sorts. I'm thinking HR service delivery, but you could think of a bank or any other call center that resonates with you. Call center, it's been set up 12 months into operations. It continues to breach SLAs. It's not meeting its desired SLAs. As a result, there is a variety of sound bites. There is low employee morale. There is low engagement. Work-life balance is amiss. And that's your situation at hand. You've been asked to step in to come and address the situation at hand. Now, again, I would have liked more dialogue, but I'm going to kind of give it to you right now to say that before appreciative inquiry, my approach would have been fairly diagnostic. My personal approach would have been diagnostic, to saying that, well, I would go back, I would go back and look at my metrics. I would look at the people involved, which are the transactions there, the major themes where we are missing the SLAs, key components, individuals who are typically involved in the, who are involved in these transactions going wrong, do a little bit of fishbone to say, what is wrong? Is the SLA unreal? Do we have clear SOPs? Do the SOPs, are they updated? New situations that are coming in, are those enclosed? Are the people well trained? Are the leaders experienced to deal with people and situations in a scenario like this? How are we building soft skills and so on? Do a bit of walk the Gemba, so go sit, watch what's happening in that environment and so on. But appreciative inquiry is a fresh take on looking at the situation, and I will now walk you through how. So if Prasanna, you can just go to my slide now. Appreciative inquiry is what you see here. It basically is, it comprises of 3 key components, which basically says it is appreciative in nature. So it is strength-based. And what does that mean? It focuses on everything which is an advantage. It completely disregards anything which doesn't add to your strength or is a position of disadvantage. So it is focused on strengths. It's focused on positive. So again, it completely removes the equation of anything which is disadvantageous, which is negative, which creates negative news, negative energy, anything of that nature. And it focuses on wholeness. And what wholeness means is it uses the entire system to generate and to work together and look at solutions. Anybody who has worked on a process would know this. When you talk about process excellence or continuous improvement, people who are closest to the process are often the people who best know the issues with the process, as also have remarkable suggestions on what can be done to improve the process. And that is the power of wholeness. So appreciative inquiry focuses on these 3 key components. It is strength-based, it is a positive approach, and it leads to, and it uses wholeness in working with people. Prasanna, if you'll just take me to the next slide. A few more things, and I will we will then pass this on to the next presenter, Linus. A few key things to know about appreciative inquiry, especially when it comes to usage, because that's the end game of this framework. It largely comprises of what is called the 4 Ds: discover, dream, design, and deliver. And what is not written here, but there's a lot of bent towards it in all the literature you will read, is about an affirmative code, which means it has to be a positive code. So from how do I improve my call center or my, my HR operations SLA, to creating an affirmative code. In its current form, it is not very affirmative because it's still talking about improving, which has a slightly negative connotation and will take everyone towards looking for problems, while in appreciative inquiry, it focuses on making sure you have an affirmative code. It then walks you through different elements of the process. It usually starts with discover. As the name suggests, this is all about diagnosing. As the name suggests, it's all about discovery. So a lot about really in a strength-based way, looking at, what is the current process. And because this is inquiry-based, it uses a lot of open-ended questions to really ask people, how do they feel about their current role? Instead of making it suggestive to saying, describing the true reality, appreciative inquiry would actually flex around it to say, tell us about a moment or a transaction that made you feel proud of the work you do. How do you think your work helps the team achieve customer delight? And so on. So in the discovery phase, it's all about discovering and using the power of positive questioning to direct people, to direct teams, individuals, organizations, larger groups to really look at what is positive. It goes on from discover to dreaming, which is, as the name suggests, all about envisioning what's the future going to look like, what role do you think you can play to make that a reality. Again, a very positive connotation, so that teams where this is being used is looking at a larger picture and how they can make a positive change in reality around it. The rest two are fairly intuitive, which focus on design. Design, as the name suggests, is all about you've discovered where you are, you know what the reality is. To go from discovery to dream, what are some of the main things or themes that you need to work on, and then deliver is the implementation. In a nutshell, that's the 4D cycle of appreciative inquiry with an affirmative core. Unlike other change models, appreciative inquiry is different. As you can see, it doesn't take you into a diagnostic phase, as I mentioned earlier. It's not asking you what's not working, who's underperforming, which SLAs are breaching. So it just kind of bypasses that and allows the users to wear blinkers to not seeing that part of the world and focusing on what really you can do to improve things from where they are. Which also then brings you to the critique of the model. Because in a certain way, if you think about it, a certain team member has an issue with using, say, a tool, a software not being present, or unreasonable business ask, unseasonal, peak times. Now, those are genuine, real issues, everyday issues in an operating rhythm of an operation center. And this appreciative inquiry actually focuses on just the positive, doesn't allow you to talk about the problems. Now, the problems are not going to get wished away. They still exist, and they will simmer under the surface, which is largely the critique about appreciative inquiry. But by and large, this model is used extensively and very powerfully by anyone who can master the technique of asking the right and the sort of positive questions to use positive psychology and drive the leadership development or the change practice or the change processes forward. It's, I know, very brief. I have some interesting notes that I'm happy to share, but in the interest of time, I'll pause briefly to take questions. We can take probably a question now, and I'll stay back after the other presenters to take any further questions.
Hi, Tanya. This is Amit here.
Hi.
Hello. No questions, just a couple of comments. So I've been part of the appreciative inquiry and had a chance to run through also. Okay. So just adding in a couple of comments. So as you rightly said, I think the important part in the dream phase is not to get bogged down of what did not work earlier. Dream phase is just to think what you want to achieve. The how part is not to be thought of in that phase. Because as humans, we generally tend to think of the past solutions and what did not work and take that as an assumption that because it did not work in that context, it would never work. So this framework teaches you to move out of that mindset. And coming on to that critique piece. So as Tanya pointed out, now problems would always be there. They would always surface. But again, this framework speaks of that let's not think of a problem which will stop you from achieving, but maybe as an opportunity in terms of how you would overcome that to still achieve. So it's all about positive, and that's where the name appreciative inquiry comes in. Thank you, Tanya.
What specific aspects, Amit, where did you use appreciative inquiry? I did speak about it, but will be good for the audience to learn from you.
I don't, because it's been few years, but we used it in an exercise in terms of when we were creating a vision in terms of where we want our leaders to be, or how we want our leaders' behavior to change to achieve that vision. So in that sense, we did use this framework.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Linus, it's over to you. I'll take any further comments, questions towards the end.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tanya, to get us back on track. I think that gives me and Sekat enough time to go through what we have. Prasanna, yeah, could you just move the next slide? Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little, but staying on that happy note that Tanya has kind of said, I'm kind of going to talk about the concept of IO. IO is nothing but industrial and organizational psychology. Now, as a term, I know we haven't really delved into this very deeply before, because we've spoken about social psychology, we've spoken about psychology as a whole, and we've kind of taken some concepts. But why do we need IO? I think that's going to be the first question. Now, let's look at organizational development or IO psychology on the whole. I think the challenge that most practitioners will face is the kind of role that you're going to play. Sometimes you're going to be a scientist. Sometimes you're going to be a detective digging up data. You need to be a lawyer because you need to advocate what is going to work, what isn't. You need to be an advisor. You need to be a teacher, a mentor, a trainer, and I think even in some cases, gamble with those hypotheses that you're going to put together. So why did this whole concept of IO come in, and where did it kind of start? Okay, so the first question that IO usually has, or what it's like to kind of go to address, is what makes people happy at work? What is something that motivates people at work? And obviously brings in all of those things that we've spoken about, like leadership styles, how do we select the right person for the job? And that's what we're looking at. Now, what is different from regular psychology and IO? If you would think of psychology, why do you need a special field? Can you just say that people would behave the same way in a social setting as they would in a work setting? But that's not necessarily true. Because if you look at when we work, we usually have this concept of putting on a different mask, right? We are different when we are with our friends. We are different when we are at home. We are different in a mob setting, if you want to call it that. And at work, it's almost the filtered version of ourselves. And considering a larger part of our lives is spent at work, on average, let's say 40, 45 hours, I'm being conservative, but I know people spend way more than that at work sometimes. If we aren't really happy with the way things are going on at work, how it's impacting us, some way it's going to impact us personally and physically and mentally as well. So that's the entire reason of delving a little bit into IO. So what I'm going to take you through is a little bit of history, where this started, who were the kind of founders beyond this entire concept. And I'll leave you with a few resources that you can go ahead, look up on, even tie it in with some of the Taylorian methods that we've kind of read about right at the start when Santosh started the session. During my entire research, I also dug up a very interesting video, which has the explanation of Hawthorne studies with people who actually participated in it. So kind of those old classic videos coming up. I'll share the link as we go along. Can we just move to the next slide, Prasanna? I'll just take people through a little basic history of what IO is all about. Okay, so coming to the basics, if you look at IO, it's not very new. It's really old, and the founding father, if you want to call it that, is this gentleman called Hugo Munsterberg. He was quite impressed actually with the whole Taylorian principles, Taylorian concepts, if you want to look at it. But if you look at what his book was based around, initially they were trying to make people work more or trick them into working more, and make sure that they kind of design jobs to maintain efficiency by dealing with fatigue in the work environment. It is only later when this lady called Lillian Gilbert, who was an engineer by profession, and she was one of the first ladies to actually do a PhD in IO. She and her husband, Frank Gilbert, and there's this little movie poster that I've got over there going, which is called Cheaper by the Dozen. They've remade that movie somewhere in the 90s, and there's actually a new version of that movie coming out now. The reason why I'm speaking about this lady is because there are some inventions that she kind of brought in using those whole concepts and principles of IO that made life a little simple for us. A classic example, if you open your refrigerator, those shelves that are inside the refrigerator, Lillian Gilbert is the one who kind of came up with it. Even the dustbin that you kind of tap your foot on before you throw something, and the flip dustbins, if you want to call them those were also kind of designed by her. And she used this concept, or kind of was the first one to come up with this entire idea of using ergonomics in terms of building things which are convenient to people using it. Okay, because when you look at any organizational setting, you're always going to look at how to make work easy, how to simplify it for people. And that's pretty much what a lot of your training efforts, your development efforts, even larger concept like Six Sigma in terms of reducing wastage, Kaizens, all of that come for. So let's look broadly now into what is the difference. Is there any difference between organizational and industrial psychology? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the whole concept of ergonomics. Okay, so moving to the next slide, I'll kind of give you a quick run through of the three concepts that IO deals with. The first one, if you look at it, is the industrial piece of psychology, which was more aligned towards the entire concept of manufacturing and manual labor. Now, when it originally started, it was the age of the industrial era. Everyone was kind of trying to make things more efficient, perform better. And that kind of extended even to World War I, to World War II, because as they say, necessity is the mother of all invention. And during that time, there was a lot of necessity to kind of mass produce things. People were kind of going through that entire phase where the buying power was increased. And that's when they came up with these concepts of even interviewing people. Because early on, there was no concept of interview. The people were available, you had a job, you taught them what to do, and they were there. But in today's day and age, if you look at how industrial psychology has evolved, it gets into the concept of understanding people better and making sure that they kind of fit into the job profile that you're hiring them for. So a lot of your backlog in terms of how you interview people, what kind of training plans you set on them, how do you evaluate their performance, all of those kind of tie in with this concept of industrial psychology, because you're looking at the best person for the job. And if not looking at the best person for the job, you modify and tweak the job in a manner where you break it down into bits and pieces that anyone who you're training can become proficient in that. Now, there's another lens, which is the second one that I'll talk about, which is the whole concept of the social dimension of work. And this is where this whole concept of job satisfaction came in. I think Santosh referred to the classic example of the Charlie Chaplin movie, Modern Times. And if you look at that, the Industrial Revolution was there. And currently also, instead of exploiting people to work better, we've now gotten into a time and a phase where we are exploiting systems to do all of that for us. We're getting more system dependent. There's a lot of talk about automation. But when it comes to that work environment, why IO or OD practitioners become very important is because we are actually checking what is the people element, or what is the people satisfaction that is coming out of the kind of jobs they do. So the first one that we'll talk about very basically is the job satisfaction or the need satisfaction. A job is not just a job, but it's also a social setting for a lot of people. And it's something that kind of gives you that whole introduction to theory X and theory Y, which I think Radhika briefly touched upon as well. Theory X is where you kind of believe that people dislike work and avoid it, whereas theory Y is more into a concept where people are enjoying their work, they find it fulfilling. And they say, right, if you find a job that you really love, you'll love working. But it's not always the case. And I think people can really vouch on that. People in OD, I don't believe that's mostly the case, because we like what we do. People in HR, learning and development, it's more out of passion that you get into these things. Okay. And that's where that second bit of meaningful engagement comes in. How well are you involved with the work you're doing? How engaged are you with the people? And how much of an opportunity is it providing you to grow as a person? All of those concepts will be covered in the engagement bit. The last bit over here, we can count on competency mapping. Yes, part of this entire concept where you kind of take your organizational psychology would bring in competency mapping as well. So some of the concepts coming over there. The last part that I wanted to talk about is stress. Now, we always believe that stress is something that can do harm, but in certain cases, there's a level of stress called eustress, and I'm not sure if anyone's gone through a stress management session, and we usually do this with first level employees or managers who are kind of new to their jobs. We talk about stress, and there's this one concept that we introduce them, which is called eustress, or this point of optimum stress levels to do your job well. They say even if you have a little stage fright, it's good, right? Before you go on stage, because that shows that you really care about your performance and you want to do this. The best of performers, the best of artists will have that. Because if you don't have that level of stress, either you could get overconfident, or you could probably be in a phase where you don't really care about what you're doing. And that's the reason why even when it comes to work, it's essential that people have some level of stress and we make their jobs, their tasks, or things that are aligned to their responsibilities in a way that it makes it easy for them to compete. Someone's referred us to the TED Talk by Kelly McCollin. Thank you so much, Poonam. Make stress your friend, definitely, because if you do that, it makes things easier for you. Thank you so much for that comment, Shiv. Anyone else, would you like to kind of talk about stress? I know I'm kind of jumping a little and going into offline concept over here. Do you think stress is good or not? Just by a show of hands, probably a thumbs up over here, just to kind of get people's vote. Do you think stress is good or it's bad? Both good and bad. Okay, depends. Pavneet is not too happy. I would say today afternoon, a lot of us in this group were stressed because our presentation hadn't come together. And I think it was good because towards the end, I think nearly about 4:30, we went from, I think, having 7 slides to close to around 40-45 slides out of nowhere. And people really came together as a group. So stress, I would say, is good. It brings out the best. It brings out the optimum level of performance in people. So as long as it's managed positively, the entire concept of organizational psychology looks at how you can manage stress, how you can look at making things easier for people. And that's when they'll kind of be able to work in an environment that's more conducive. They are happy with the financial benefits they are getting. They're happy with the growth and development that is presented. And they obviously get an opportunity to be themselves with their co-workers, their supervisors, and are content with the kind of workload and demands that are placed to them. Okay. The last part that I want to touch on is the concept of ergonomics. It's actually called human behavior psychology. And over here, I'll just broadly touch on 4 categories, and you'll kind of be able to relate to it with certain aspects that you do. Now, why am I talking so much about ergonomics is sometimes when we design systems, we design processes, we miss the basics of how it's going to be done. And that is a model that IO looks at very closely. It's called the scientist practitioner model. I'll explain that in the next slide, but I'll just give you what are some of the broad aspects that the entire ergonomics looks at. Okay, the first one is attention. And the question that ergonomics is going to ask is how attention is maintained. What tasks would really require attention, and how to kind of create systems that will make sure that people pay attention. I think a classic one is during one of our discussions, someone had said, you have these nudges. Like someone came up with the example of the seatbelt noise indicator. It's a checkpoint, right? It's something that you need to do before you drive your car. Now, that's a more simple version to look at things, but think about someone who is an anesthetician or probably a surgeon in an environment that's going to kind of set up for an operation. You have to follow a certain set of rules to maintain that level of attention towards the person lying on that table, because one wrong move from you could jeopardize a person's life. Even people who are into very high skilled jobs, and I'll kind of go back to Anil's comment about pilots, not just fighter pilots, but even commercial pilots, they have a lot of lives at risk when they're flying that plane. They have a certain set of rules. They have to maintain attention. So literally your DGCA has rules and regulations in terms of how long or what duration a pilot can fly during a given month or a given week to ensure that they're maintaining the right kind of attention. The next part is this whole concept of cognitive engineering, which talks about how do workers use and obtain information provided to them, either through software, either through nudges, either through training modules presented to them. And that's where your whole concept of instructional design comes into play. So I think anyone who's gone through ID would kind of understand the first thing that they teach you over there is the entire concept of having instructional design is to make training idiot proof, that no one can kind of mess with it basically. Okay. And just quickly wrapping to the last few concepts over there, breaking the task or doing a task analysis to understand what's simplifying things, and the whole concept of cognitive tasks analysis. I know Sekat's going to talk a little bit more about this in his system 1 and 2 behavior. So I'll wrap. Before we continue, just a few takeaways and references. I know we're going to put the PPT up so you can use these. The video that I spoke about, Hawthorne studies, it's kind of very interesting. It's a 15-minute video. If you get a chance, please give it a watch. The whole concept of scientist practitioner model that I spoke about earlier, which is kind of tied into IO, but also works for OD. Because before you apply concepts, you need to understand whether it's going to work and it's going to solve those organizational problems. Now, people who are usually certified in IO, there's an entire body that's set up, which is the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology. It's kind of derived right from those Taylorian methods I mentioned. You can go onto this website, which is SIOP, and get more information. And the job task analysis of breaking down the jobs based on those 3 factors that we spoke about. There's a huge database called ONET. If you just go ahead and Google it, you'll find this site, which gives you a lot of data, a lot of information about different job roles, different profiles, and what they entail. With that, I think I'll hand it over to Sekat, and I think me and Tanya will be available for questions if people have it post the session.
Hey, thank you so much, Linus, for being so thorough. This is great. So before I really move on to the slides, so Prasanna, no need for moving on to the slides right away. I will ask for it if you're around, Prasanna. The theory which I'm going to introduce, before I introduce the theory, I want to introduce the context in which this theory really lies. So this theory lies in the context of leadership, or to synthesize it even further, leader actions. Now, many of you in this virtual room are leaders or have played leadership roles, or you work in very close quarters with leaders. Whatever leader actions they do, by leader action, I mean the things they do, a leader does, right? They usually are categorized into three categories, okay? Just to ask all of you, what does the leader do? Imagine yourself as a leader. What are the few leader actions you do? Can you quickly type that onto the chat window? If you take too much time to type, then I'll make this a monologue of sorts, because we don't have too much of time. What are some of the leader actions you perform as a leader on a day-to-day? Responsible for people engagement. Can you synthesize this further? So driving change, what do you do in order to drive change? That's what leader actions mean. There are certain things which you do in order to set direction. There are certain things which you do to gain alignment. There are certain things which you do in order to seek the commitment of people, right? What are those things? What are those things you do? We are talking very simple English here. Walking the talk is, okay, can we simplify this even further, synthesize this even further? We are talking leader actions.
Like doing what I expect everyone else to do.
What is an example of that? An example of that, could it be that you are managing a team meeting, you're managing a stand-up call? I'm going to that level. We are not staying at that abstract level of, say, for example, creating high impact on time to competency, right? What do you do in order to create high impact to competency? What do you do, right? They may sound very naive, but these are things which you will be doing tomorrow morning, right? So again, show up on all my commitments is a larger superset. What are those commitments? answer to that. What are those commitments?
But wouldn't
What
that
are your leader
change
actions?
from leader to leader?
Absolutely. So so the question is to you. What do you do as a leader?
Sure,
What are your
sure.
leader actions? Let's come to that. Paint the future scenario. How do you do that? You do that in a stand-up meeting. You address people. You talk to people in one-on-one meetings. You go to an open house. You address people in an open house. I'm talking to that level of synthesis. Try to bring that leadership action to that level of sharpness and synthesis. Now, say for example, anchoring stand-up meetings. That's what we essentially do as leaders, right? Having career conversations as people leaders, career conversation, getting into feedback conversations, making decisions, excellent, making decision on a product upgrade or a feature inclusion in your product as a product leader. These are the leader actions which you do. For meeting, be punctual on all my meetings, absolutely go prepared in those meetings. And the preparation could be of a particular nature. It could be ensuring you get your research in place and you get into the meeting with some sort of insights. So those are leader actions. Now, these leader actions, now all of us, did we understand what are leader actions? Are you able to understand the sharpness and the level of synthesis I'm talking about? If so, give me thumbs up. I will know I can proceed further. I'm going to kind of wrap this up in next 5 minutes or so. Thumbs up. Okay, great. Now, these leader actions. Now, Prasanna, you can show the slide. Now it's a good time to show the slide. Prasanna. So these leader actions would be in either of these categories. It could be cognitive. So me, like Ashma mentioned, doing preparation for a meeting. So I could be really synthesizing some research insights before I get into the meeting. So that's cognitive. Me really thinking it out, me doing a very critical thinking or reviewing a product feature. That's cognitive. Okay. What is conversational then? So much of the leader's job could be cognitive, especially if you are a strategic leader, right? If you're a people leader, much of your leader actions would be what? Conversational, transactional, what? Or cognitive?
Conversational.
Could be conversational, getting into coaching conversations. So these are conversationals. Career conversation could be conversational, coaching conversation, feedback conversation. What is transactional then? What is transactional? That's also something which you do as a leader. Transaction. What is transactional? If cognitive is something which is requiring you to think, step back a little bit, conversational is something where you are really prepping yourself, you're being very mindful of what you are saying. There's a lot of premium on the words that get extolled. Day to day, please tell me.
Day-to-day oversight of.
Just give an example, just one leader action example.
Meeting, somebody asking someone to step up for a meeting or to step in for a meeting, delegation.
Delegation. Okay.
I'm thinking signing a form, a voucher, okaying someone's leave.
Yes.
Budget.
Now you're there. Okaying somebody's leave. That's regardless of how senior I am, I have to approve the leaves for my DRs, my N-1, right? That's transactional. Me, because of my experience, now I have a body of experience. I have a body of exposure with me. I have my knowledge. Because of that, there could be a nature of problem that might come to me, but it might not really require me to step back. I might give a very intuitive answer, yes or no to that problem. The problem is solved just because of the sheer experience, right? What's wired with me. So these are the three things which we do as leaders, right? Cognitive, conversational, transactional. Now that's the context. Now let's introduce ourselves to the theory. But before we do that, right, we will digress a little bit. Who is the only psychologist who has ever received the Nobel Prize? Only psychologist. I'll give you one clue. The person actually received the Nobel Prize for economics. They didn't receive it for psychology. I'll give you one more clue. The person who received it got it for economics because it was in the stream of what we call as behavioral economics.
Daniel Goleman.
Not Daniel Goleman. Daniel got the first.
Oh
name.
yeah. Shucks. Man, I forgot
Daniel
what-
Kahneman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Daniel
Right?
Kahneman. Yes.
He wrote a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he, in the entire book, it's a fat book. And the only thing which he talks about in that particular book, and if we can come to the slide, he talks about system 1 and 2. But the depth and the pace with which he reads, he gives the entire narrative is fantastic, it's beautiful, right? Now, I definitely, anybody who, after listening to my narrative is interested, more curious to know about what system 1 and 2 is, I blindly tell you to buy the book on your Kindle, or you can buy a physical copy. Let's go to the next slide, Prasanna. It'll be good to have a visual anchor. So system 1 and 2. Now, according to Daniel Kahneman, our brain, only for reference, he has used these two terms very loosely. Okay, not that there is a system 1 and system 2, but just for this conversation's sake, our brain is divided into system 1 and 2. System 1 is basically the more automatic or intuitive part of the brain, right? And again, I'm using the word part of the brain very loosely. Okay, there's no such part. Okay, just for the conversation's sake. And there's another part which is your system 2. So the time when my professor taught me this, there was one in a different course which I was learning this from. There was a student who asked the question: is there any assessment to figure out is my personality system 1 or system 2, right? And it was a naive question, right? We operate from both system 1 and system 2. So system 1 is the more the automatic, intuitive part. System 2 is the part which requires a certain degree of concentration, a certain degree of deliberation. It needs the usage of language, right? All of us think in a particular language. Hindi, Bengali, Punjabi, Malayali, there is a language. Our mental chatter, there's a mental chatter going inside our brain, and it's in a particular language, right? It might not be English for many of us. It could be our native language, right? So your system 2 requires that language, right? And are all of you with me as of now? Before I shift gears, okay. So when where do we typically use system 1? System 1 we typically use where we are confronted with, say, very intuitive, close-ended questions whose answer is yes or no. I have to make a very quick decision, right? That's where we use system 1. Any examples? Fight or flight? Absolutely, right? If I see a lion in front of me, my system 1 will say run. Okay, there's not too much of language processing that needs to happen, right? System 1 will really not fail. It will give me the right direction. Which are the instances where system 1 can really fail and will need the help of system 2? Can you give me some instances? Think leadership. Think leadership. Okay, let me ask a flip question. Okay,
In
before
Tinder,
that.
swipe left, swipe right, that is the wrong place for system 1.
Yeah, you brought a fantastic point here, Prasanna. Not that I have used Tinder. I got married much earlier before Tinder came in, but I kind of understand the wireframes of how Tinder operates. Now, in Tinder, say for example, what essentially you are doing, you are taking a live decision. You're taking a live decision where the variables are not really yes or no, right? You have to take in a lot more variables and you have to be very deliberate. What should you be using there, system 1 or system
2? System 2.
System 2, because this is for you to build a relationship. That app is there for you to nurture a relationship with someone, right? And you should be ideally using system 2. Which are the scenarios? Now, let me just flip this question. Which are the scenarios where a leader can use system 1 very safely? a leader can use system 1 very safely, unless you have practical, okay, clear, okay. So where can a leader use system 1? Say, for example, let me answer this because we don't have much time. You can use system 1 very confidently if you are very experienced in the context in which you lead. You have gone through varied contexts. There's a huge body of experience wiring your system 1. Your system 1, your intuition is on the, say, for example, I give you a very specific example, driving, okay? In driving, I can use system 1 very effectively if I've driven in different contexts, in terrains, in flyovers, in highways, and I have huge body of experience of driving in different complex scenarios. Then I can use system 1 very easily because my system 1 is being informed by my memories of my lived experience. But where your lived experience is very limited, say you are a new leader, you're a new CEO coming into a new company, and the expectation is for you to lead. Can you use your system 1? Can you use your system 1? There's so much of learning you need to do about the new context in which you're supposed to lead. That's where you ideally should use your system 2. Okay. And my intention was to just get you curious about system 1 and 2. I will only tell you there is no breadth to be explored than what I have covered here. But there is so much depth. I've probably explored only the surface when it comes to system 1 and 2. For if you really want to get into the depths of things, please read the book Thinking Fast and Slow. Any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I am past 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, 7 minutes. Sorry for that. Yeah. Questions, feelings, memories. Yeah, that's a checkout for us from our end.
No, Sagar, just a feeling. Amit here. Thinking fast and slow will make you think really slow. That's my feeling of the book. It's a heavy book.
Yeah, absolutely. It will start helping you observe your own thinking. It will start critiquing your own thinking.
It's a pretty nice
that's a very
book,
good
but
place
yeah,
to be
it's
in.
a heavy book. I agree.
And in a place, and I tell you why system 2 is so relevant for our leaders today, because they are operating in not a complicated times, they are operating in very complex times where the variables are not really known. So I work for a company called FedEx, right? Today, a war in Ukraine, right, could be affecting, like what Santosh mentioned in systems thinking, could be affecting a lot of our major decisions, right? So, so it's very important that leaders they step aside. Let me ask you one more question. What can really come in the way of that transition to system 1 and system 2? So when system 1 fails, usually system 1 tells system 2 that I need your help. What can come in the way?
Your ego.
Wow, gold. Our ego, and absolutely our ego, and very too much overconfidence and over reliance on the fact that I have seen it all. My system 1 is getting informed by a lot of experience, right? That overconfidence, if it comes, yeah, that could really come in the way of that transition from system 1 and 2. So all the very best, everyone. There are a lot of, if you Google up what are the tips to operate from more from system 2, you will get a lot of answers. So for that, Professor Google is there. And yeah, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, Sagar.
Well explained, Sagar. Very well explained.
Thank you. It's so good to see Santosh. Hi,
Yeah.
Santosh.
Can you
So
hear me?
good to see you. Yeah.
Okay, here is a suggestion for teach back. I know we have very less people here, but still, the Teach Back team, go ahead and acknowledge yourself. What would you like to acknowledge yourself for? One by one. Otherwise, we are very critical about ourselves. Let's see, what is one thing that you have done well, that you feel good, that you would like to acknowledge yourself?
I can go first. I hope we've given the team a lot of thought starters or a lot of food for thought, because we had a lot of different concepts that were introduced. I know there was a lot that we tried to squeeze in, because psychology in itself is so broad. That book that Prasanna also showed, I think, says it all. So I'm hoping people go back to kind of some of the reference material, some of the information we've shared, and research a little bit more on it. That was,
So
I think.
I'm down. So that's a very good one, but it's very on top about we. Just
Okay.
you for what you did. It's one or two things that you felt good.
So I was happy that I did a lot of research with regards to IO, because I think the first connect that I had with the group, and I introduced the concept, and everyone was like, oh, that's something new. So that was, I think, I was happy with, and I really liked the fact that I found that video of the Hawthorne experiment, because that study, when I went into it and looked at that video, it's like, it's easy to relate to people
hold on.
actually sharing their
I'm going to stop
experiences.
I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
I have a mentor called John Carter.
Okay.
John Carter is an expert in the world on Gestalt. He told me one day, Santosh, the word thank you is a thankless word. So I was confused. He said, you know, when you suddenly say thank you, I don't get to know what are you feeling. Someone says something, you say thank you. So we tend to verbalize. I don't get to know the feeling. The acknowledging is just to the heart. I feel really good that I was able to do some research and found some new things, and I felt lovely connecting with my co-people. Then zip up. No, because we just do our strategize and all those things in that process. We are not really giving to our heart that, oh, I'm good. So I asked John, okay, if not thank you, what would I say? So John said, I would like to hear from you. How did you feel when I did something for you? So I said, expand it more. So he said, he tell me you felt overjoyed. Your heart was filled with gratitude. That's good for me. Thank you comes like a very artificial, immediate thing. So similarly, we tend to rationalize. So I'm giving the other guys a chance. Just give yourself an acknowledgement. People who participated in the Teach Back. How would that be?
That would
Who
be
are the other
nice.
team members?
That would be
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. Who are the other team members?
I think I just go to say that I have always been curious about psychology, never spent time in it. So this was making me very vulnerable to put my hand up, because I said, okay, this is like bad medicine. I'll go do it, only so that I really invest time to understand it and benefit from it. So I'm feeling, bucket list checked.
Thank you. Who else want to try from the team?
I'll like to go next. I think I really appreciate myself for doing a decent job in the limited time that I had managing home and kids. And I'll also like to, appreciate Radhika for sharing a lot of her research with me.
Thank you. That was a very good one. Tell me, who is your biggest critic?
My kids. Okay.
Somebody would say kid, somebody would say spouse, but the
Maybe
truth
myself. Yeah.
So we also need to change. We'll do a great job. We will study, we will prepare, and we go back to sleep saying that, yeah, did I do a good job? Did I overshoot? Did I give so much theory? all kind of doubts. And if we don't start appreciating ourselves, how would other people appreciate us? It's a point that I say that whatever level that we have done, that's okay. Because each one of us are different. So it starts from my own ability to acknowledge myself and pat at my back and said, you know what? Based on my stuff, I've done a good job. Period. Who else want to go?
I would like to go next, Santosh. Actually, when I wanted to do this session, all the slots were taken away. Only the psychology, only the first slot was open. And I was not comfortable with it, but I went for it anyway. But now that I took that slot, I did some research and I found that some of the old books that I read were relating to it. And Saikat added that system 1, system 2 part, which I already had a faint idea on. So I was able to knit together whatever little I know. And I summoned
You're
up.
talking using your logical, rational brain. Talk from the heart. What is it that one thing you want to give yourself? Acknowledge yourself. Give
No,
a
I'm happy
compliment
that I
yourself.
pulled it together. I'm happy I pulled it together and somehow I flew it with whatever
good.
courage I could summon. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. And what is it that others would like to acknowledge his team for?
So Santosh, this is Amit here. So I think I will acknowledge the team for its simplicity.
Very nice. What else?
I think for me, it's like the way so beautifully they created the balance for every speaker. Nobody was left out and everybody was like visible there, present. To create a balance is not easy. Coming from my own experience, I know it's difficult. So the way they put it beautifully is just brilliant.
You know, whenever you are acknowledging somebody else, you are strengthening that part in yourself. There is a statement that I use. If you spot it, you got it. If you spot that somebody is cunning, you go to have cunningness in you. Na? Otherwise, how do you spot? If you spot that somebody is kind, you need to have kindness in you. Na? Otherwise, you won't be able to spot that. If you spot that somebody is brilliant, you need to have brilliance in you. So when we are able to focus on something and really acknowledge, we are actually strengthening that part in ourselves by doing so. And if you're only knowing that what didn't work and what didn't go well, we are strengthening that critical part in ourselves, that self-critical part, because that's what we have been doing to ourselves. We know that we are not best, but am I able to really notice that something good that they have done? And for me to notice, this is another one-liner I have. It's called notice what you notice. Think about.
Sorry, Amit.
Yeah.
I think you are doing the perfect example of appreciative inquiry.
One way, because appreciative inquiry came up only 30 years ago. But before that, the human ability to really see something good in others, right? And also some of the fundamental psychological theories that we say that whatever we focus, we are expanding. Whatever I notice in other person, I am strengthening that in myself. So those were there. And by doing that, we are unconsciously also creating a personal transformation in ourselves. With that underlying thing that we can be very critical of ourselves. We are very critical of ourselves. We also become very critical of the others. In the process, we're not really acknowledging, we are not giving credit to ourselves. We're not saying that. Still, after doing a great job, we go back and say, yeah, I don't know how others felt it. We did a good job. But when we did the transitioning from Saikat to others, something went wrong. And so this is what our focus is. And we forget to really acknowledge all the good things that we have done. So that's what I wanted to bring into the focus. Done a great job. So I've been in and out, particularly today, because there are a lot of rains here. So I need to figure out whether I need to shift or whether the rains will really come up. So great.
Please be safe.
Yeah.
Please think of safety. You need a plan A and a plan B.
I
And
know.
you
I
need one
both,
every year if you continue to live there.
Yeah. So the good news is that I don't get surrounded all over by water. It's like a slope. So the lower areas get flooded. So I can keep moving up. But I need to figure out what to do with the dogs, where to move up and things like that. So not very dangerous, but still nice.
So the weather forecast or things which come on the internet, are they usually accurate in your area, or they are very different from?
This time, it seems to be accurate. That's a sad thing. So it means it's saying that another 4 days.
Okay.
So then I'm done. It continues. So all I'm thinking is, how do I teach myself to enjoy this? Because as kids, we loved water, playing around with the water. So I'm getting my childish curiosity instead of the adult fear, and say that let me enjoy this process. And of course, create a plan B. Okay.
Teachers has to respect nature also.
Of
The
course.
forces of nature.
You know,
yes.
yeah. We are only thinking from our side. Oh, this is creating some inconvenience for me. But from a nature perspective, this is the most natural thing to happen. More water, Earth needs more water. So good. From a system thinking perspective, it's good. But if I think only from my perspective, it's an inconvenience and fear. All right. All the best, guys. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, entire team. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Wonderful teaching.
Good night.
Coach.